very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World's Panorama, the only show that gives you a 360-degree view of major global news in the most concise, direct and unbiased reports. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Post-Trump's talk in Syria, Kofi Annan resigns amid escalation and violence. UN General Assembly adopts a new resolution, 31 nations abstain. Human Rights Watch slams Burma for actions in quelling mob violence. Human rights abuses continue as Western governments ease sanctions. US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta meets Israeli leaders amid reports of splits on striking Iran, stresses US military action against Iran remains an option. And China and US dominate the medal tally at Olympics 2012. India's medal surge seems unlikely. Our focus this week is on the recent developments in strife-torn Syria. The UN General Assembly on Friday overwhelmingly adopted a Saudi-drafted resolution on Syria that expressed grave concern at the escalating violence. The resolution got 133 votes in favor, while 12 countries voted against it. 31 countries, including India, abstained. The spotlight 2 weeks ago was on Damascus. Now it shifts on Aleppo, where there has been a considerable build-up of military means and where we have reason to believe that the main battle is about to begin. The surge in violence came within hours of former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan quitting as international peace envoy for Syria and underlined the importance of mediation efforts in the 17-month-old uprising against President Assad. But what will follow in Syria is unclear. To bring some clarity on that front, I have with me an expert in West Asia affairs, Rushda Siddiqui. Welcome to the show, ma'am. But before that, we take a closer look at how the situation is likely to pan out in Syria. Have a look at this report.
A visibly shaken Kofi Annan admitted defeat in his attempts to bring peace to Syria on Thursday and resigned from his post as international envoy for the war-torn country. Annan, however, laid the blame for the failure on the big powers that claim to back him.
No, they don't leave with me. First of all, the 6-point plan, even though many people dub it the Annan plan, is the Security Council plan. It was endorsed by a Security Council resolution, and we should be reminded of that, and I think the Council members should also remember that. It's the Security Council resolution, so it stays on the table with the Council and the international community.
Annan's departure after less than 6 months is a blow to international efforts to broker a diplomatic solution to the increasingly violent conflict. What began in March last year as a largely peaceful protest movement has become a civil war.
The Secretary-General said in his statement that Mr. Annan had informed the Secretary-General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Nabil el-Arabi, and him of his intention not to renew his mandate when it expires on the 31st of August.
Also, a Saudi Arabia drafted resolution on Syria has dropped its demand for President Bashar al-Assad to step down and sanctions be imposed against the country after some member states, including India, objected to the provisions. The resolution, which is not binding, is aimed at pressurizing countries like China and Russia, which blocked Security Council resolutions calling for tougher sanctions against Assad and his regime. The crisis in Syria has worsened over the last 17 months when the uprising against Assad regime began. The UN Security Council has remained divided over the action needed to stop the violence in Syria, with Russia and China vetoing 3 resolutions.
All right, let me get in, Rushda, at this point in time. Rushda, what do you see in this resolution? This seems to be a more watered-down resolution. 103 nations voted in favor, where about 31 countries abstained. Now, this resolution, which is also not legally binding, what's the significance?
It's actually a mandate about, what is the step which is going to be taken with regard to Syria next? And the reason why this resolution is important is because somewhere along the line, the opposition groups in Syria have gotten their support.
Okay.
What was earlier a little mild support is now a more pronounced support.
Okay. So what does it say that 133 nations voted in favor? There were some points in the resolution that were dropped, while some, like Assad should step down, they remained in there. And also, let's talk a bit about India's stand over here. India actually abstained from voting, which is a different strategy that it adopted from the last time when the UN resolution was voted upon.
That is the more interesting point, because India has not shifted its stand. It may seem that India shifted its stand, it did not. In the earlier resolution, when the earlier Arab League resolution was being passed by the UN,
right,
that time again, it was India which had insisted that this clause of stepping down of regime, handing over of power, regime change does not come in.
Okay.
They wanted a solution for Syria, from Syria.
Okay.
It was again a negotiation which was taking place, and our ambassadors have been pretty active on that front. This resolution is the reason why India abstained is simply because of this. Because in this resolution, the final clause, if you look at it, is about President Assad stepping down.
Right.
That regime change clause has come in. And India is supporting Kofi Annan because Kofi Annan has said that there are two sides to the violence. All the violence is not coming from Assad's regime.
Right. That's a crucial point. I was just coming to Mr. Kofi Annan and the way he resigned. Do you believe this is a huge blow to the efforts towards peace in Syria? How do you see Kofi Annan stepping down after 6 months of hard work, working on ways to bring about peace in the nation?
It is a huge setback. If you look at it in real terms, it is a very, very huge setback, because the man was trying his level best to be objective, unbiased, and he was trying his level best to bring about a peace which is very acceptable to just about all the parties. Don't forget, Syria is a very, very multicultural society. And any change, if it's drastic, if it's sudden,
right,
and if it is unstructured,
right,
is going to lead to a whole lot of fragmentation and chaos.
Okay.
Which is what Kofi Annan was trying to avoid. He was very careful in stating that all violence has to come to a stop.
Right.
Which meant both Assad and the opposition forces have to come to a halt.
Which is clearly not happening at this point, but we see this divided international community, their different stances on what should be the proper way to end violence in Syria. In what way do you see the United Nations now trying to have some sort of say in what's happening in Syria? Because that is also in a sense crucial, because now Kofi Annan has stepped down. So do we see more United Nations intervention to take control or to try to do something about the situation?
This is what the General Assembly resolution now, this is what it's reflecting. Right. That the United Nations, when it was trying to structure a solution, that has been totally left out.
Okay.
The Arab League and the more militant stand of the Arab League, of regime change, of increasing violence, that is coming in.
Right.
And that is what India is opposed to, because India is very, very clear in saying that we are not going to be supporting any funders of terrorist activities and all the anti-state activities. The escalation in violence is largely due to the escalation in arms supply, particularly small arms supply to the opposing groups. It's no longer a part of the Arab Spring,
right,
which was just a peaceful demonstration. In 2011, when you saw, it was just people coming out in the streets.
Right.
Now it's a proper civil war, and that is going to escalate.
And obviously it's escalating because the arms are being continuously supplied by Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other nations as well. To some extent, this violence, many believe, is also backed by the West. But keeping that aside, also what Kofi Annan believed was the divided international community, which has really not let peace prevail or move forward as far as controlling Syrian situation is concerned. So how do we look at that? Because this is also a big challenge to get this divided international community on the table and come to start the conversation, bring about those important talking points.
That's true, but keep it in mind that, what Kofi Annan was saying and what he had been trying to, first things first, there is no opposition which is organized in Syria.
Okay.
You have the SNC, but the SNC is just about a whole lot of groups which are opportunistic.
Right.
Even they themselves are very divided. There is no specified opposition. And unless you de-escalate the violence, it's more external players versus internal interests. And everybody's domestic interest is coming into play here.
All right. So,
which is what Kofi Annan has been warning you about.
Absolutely.
Which is what the United Nations is saying, that, before you put your petty personal interest, your own petty domestic interest, keep the larger interests of the region and of the world in mind.
Prishna, that's perhaps the most important point as far as Syria is concerned. We've seen 6 months of efforts by Kofi Annan fail. Let's hope a solution is soon in sight. Thanks so much for joining me this week on World Panorama. With that, time for a very short break. After that, Greece reaches agreement on further austerity cuts. Stay with us for a detailed report. Thanks for staying with us. U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta took a tough tone against Iran on Wednesday as he implicitly threatened the possibility of an American military attack if Iran decides to develop a nuclear weapon. Panetta's repeated emphasis on pursuing other options if diplomacy fails did not mark a change in policy, but gave his remarks a harder edge than his previous statements. Here's more.
U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta used some of his strongest language yet about possible military action against Iran on Wednesday, but cautioned during a visit to Israel that all other options, including so far failed negotiations with Tehran, needed to be exhausted first.
I think we have to exhaust, just as the Prime Minister has made this point, we have to exhaust every option, every effort, before we resort to military action. I think that's important.
Panetta, on a week-long trip to the Middle East and North Africa, repeatedly stressed that the United States would not allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, a position he renewed on Wednesday. But that military option is a last resort.
We will not allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, period. We will not allow them to develop a nuclear weapon. And we will exert all options in the effort to ensure that that does not happen.
But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran is not convinced the international community has the will to stop them from achieving nuclear capabilities.
However forceful our statements, they have not convinced Iran that we are serious about stopping them. Right now, the Iranian regime believes that the international community does not have the will to stop its nuclear program. This must change, and it must change quickly, because time to resolve this issue peacefully is running out.
Even as it strengthens sanctions, Washington is broadly bolstering Israeli defenses and discussing contingency options with Israel. Obama last week announced he was releasing $70 million in approved funding for Iron Dome, a project backed strongly by the powerful U.S. pro-Israel lobby.
Recent reports from Myanmar have evidently shown that there is no respite for the Muslim minority of the country. The recent violence targeted the Rohingya Muslims who are permanently settled in western parts of the country. There was understandably some reaction to the killings, which was strongly quelled by the Buddhist-dominated army and extremist monks. While no exact figures are available, it has been reported that following the 11 killings, hundreds of more Muslims have been killed and their properties destroyed in the Rakhine or the Arakan state. Here's the latest. 56-page report released on 1st August by a New York-based rights group said the Myanmar government failed to intervene in sectarian violence during June's bloody unrest between Rakhine Buddhists and Muslim Rohingya.
What was consistent in these narratives was that there was a government failure to intervene. And that meant then that people on both sides began to arm to defend themselves. And ultimately, a lack of government protection meant that emboldened partisans on both sides more thoroughly planned and executed coordinated attacks on the other side. So in rather short order, the situation descended into chaos.
A day earlier, Myanmar said it strongly rejected accusations over its handling of unrest in the state of Rakhine following some of the country's worst sectarian clashes in June.
Myanmar strongly rejects the accusations made by some quarters that abuses and excessive use of force were made by the authorities in dealing with the situation.
United Nations envoy Thomas Quintana is in Myanmar to discuss human rights issues with President Thein Sein and other officials.
Peace and stability is indispensable for the ongoing democratization and reform process in Myanmar.
Mob attacks in June left dozens dead and tens of thousands homeless. What started the rampage is unclear and the subject of heated debate in Myanmar, where there is entrenched, long-standing animosity towards the stateless Rohingyas. The UN Refugee Agency said Rohingyas are still facing discrimination from security forces and many are too scared to return to their homes even though they are running out of food in refugee camps. Over to Europe now, where Greece's government on Wednesday agreed to take fresh austerity measures of 11.5 billion euros for 2013 and 2014 after junior partners in the ruling coalition dropped demands to implement the steep cuts over a longer period, paving the way for the recession-ravaged country to secure crucial funding from its international creditors. Greece will now hold talk on the cuts with a delegation of international leaders in Athens who need to sign off the austerity package before approving the next 8th tranche. Without these funds, Greece could run out of cash, possibly in the coming weeks.
Greek Finance Minister Yanis Tonoras said on Wednesday government coalition leaders have clinched a deal on 11.5 billion euros of austerity cuts demanded by the country's lenders under its bailout terms. With 3.2 billion euros worth of bond payments due in August, the clock is ticking for Greece to please visiting Trioca inspectors who have been in Athens waiting for the government deal since July 24th.
The Prime Minister proposed that there had to be agreement that a basic requirement for Greece to remain in the Eurozone and to have the possibility for further negotiations. There must be fiscal expenditure of 11.5 billion euros. The proposal was accepted.
Samaras and Stonoras have made clear they do not want to raise the issue of renegotiating the bailout deal with lenders before Greece regains credibility after 2 years of missed targets and empty promises.
In every case, that which was in common agreement was there be little burden on the socially weaker classes. We will not proceed with measures that will burden society.
The measures demanded by the Trioca for 2013-2014, which include salary, pension and benefit cuts, are certain to further upset a public reeling from 2 years of austerity. The Trioca must deliver to Greece's lenders a review on its reforms before further rescue fund installments can be released to the country. The review, which will rule on whether Athens gets more cash from its €130 billion bailout, is not expected until September.
With that, time for a very short break. After that, a look at some news from the world of entertainment. 007 returns to enthrall his fans. Wait up for the first look of James Bond's latest Skyfall. Watching World Panorama. Time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap.
Floods triggered by Typhoon Saula have killed 8 people in the Philippines. The death toll may rise further, disaster management officials said. Rivers swelled and flooding in Manila and coastal provinces has forced more than 1,45,000 people to flee their homes and seek shelter on higher ground. Floodwaters submerged the low-lying town of Obando after heavy rains destroyed 3 dikes over the weekend. Venezuelan opposition leader Enrique Capriles said on Wednesday he would scrap preferential oil deals with foreign allies if he defeats socialist president Hugo Chavez in an October election to lead the South American OPEC member. Chavez has sought to boost his influence abroad by offering crude deals to nations in Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean. NATO forces should stay in Afghanistan until they have finished their job to ensure stability, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday, criticizing the planned withdrawal of most combat troops by 2014. Putin reiterated Kremlin concerns that the pullout of the US-led alliance due to start next year will leave the Central Asian region south of Russia vulnerable to militant violence and drug trafficking. 2 car bombs in central Baghdad kill at least 13 people and wound 30 others near a busy main intersection, police and hospital sources said on Tuesday. Clouds of black smoke rose above where the twin bombs exploded minutes apart. The explosions followed a spate of attacks in Baghdad and across the country a week ago that killed more than 100 people in a coordinated surge of violence against mostly Shiite Muslim targets.
And now brace yourself for the latest sporting action in our next report. Here's all the news from the London Olympics 2012.
For his Olympic swan song at the London Games, US swimmer Michael Phelps was heading into uncharted waters. The 27-year-old American has spent his life demolishing records and building a stockpile of gold medals. On Tuesday, he finally won his first gold medal of the London Games when he anchored the 4x200 meter freestyle relay team to victory and overhauled Soviet gymnast Larisa Latlina's previous record of 18 Olympic medals. China has vehemently rejected suggestions of doping as a growing row over the astonishing performance of the Chinese swimmer threatens to overshadow Phelps' bid to become the most decorated Olympian of all time on Tuesday. Ye Shibin survived a late challenge from Alicia Coates to win the 200-meter individual medley final. The victory followed her incredible win in the 400 medley 3 days earlier. Her performances in London, where millions of people around the world are seeing her compete for the first time, have triggered thinly veiled accusations of doping by the Chinese. The head of the Indonesian Badminton Association said the World Badminton Federation needed to launch an investigation and review its systems after the body charged 8 female players with misconduct on Wednesday, after 4 Olympic doubles teams had attempted to throw matches to secure a more favourable draw later in the tournament. The 8 were disqualified by the Sports Federation from the London Games competition. The players involved in Tuesday's matches were China's world champions Wang Jiali and Yu Yang, Indonesian players, and 2 South Korean pairs.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap. For the 3rd year in a row, Kate Middleton tops Vanity Fair's International Best Dressed list. Known for her effortless style, the Duchess of Cambridge has dazzled in high-end designs by Alexander McQueen and Alice Temperley and off-the-rack pieces from Topshop and Zara. Middleton shares her title with her brother-in-law Prince Harry, who makes the list for the first time. Daniel Craig is back as 007 in the 23rd adventure in the longest-running film franchise of all time. In Skyfall, Bond's loyalty to M is tested as her past comes back to haunt her. As MI6 comes under attack, 007 must track down and destroy the threat, no matter how personal the cost. Skyfall is set to hit theatres in November. Peter Jackson has announced that his film adaptation of The Hobbit will be split into 3 movies. The director said he made the decision after wrapping up shooting recently in New Zealand on what was originally supposed to be 2 films. The first, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, opens in December. Katie Holmes cancelled what would have been her first public appearance since filing for divorce from Tom Cruise on the 28th of June. Katie was scheduled to hit the red carpet at the Dizzy Feet Foundation Gala, but reports say Holmes pulled out at the last minute due to security concerns. Writer Gore Vidal, who filled his intellectual works with acerbic observations on politics, sex and American culture while carrying out feuds with his big-name literary rivals, died on Tuesday at the age of 86. His nephew Burr Steers confirmed Vidal died on Tuesday at his home in the Hollywood Hills of complications in pneumonia. That's all we have for you in this edition of World's Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. You can join us on Facebook at facebook.com/WPRSTV and Twitter. Our handle is @RSTV News for the latest world news. As we wrap up, take a look back at Marilyn Monroe's life and style as they were remembered and celebrated in Hollywood 50 years after her death. Goodbye and thanks for watching.